Thank you so much all for joining us today for this briefing for our partners in the health and environmental communities on our new report from the Lung Association, Driving to Clean Air. My name is Laura Kate Bender. I'm the National Assistant Vice President for Healthy Air at the American Lung Association. You'll hear from me and a couple of my colleagues today as we present this new report with the goal of making it useful for you. So first, I will get started by kicking it over to Deb Brown, Chief Mission Officer for the American Lung Association, to offer some opening remarks.
Thank you, Laura Kate, and hello, everyone. I'm Deb Brown. I'm the Chief Mission Officer for the American Lung Association, and we're so pleased to welcome you, our partners working for health, the environment, and environmental justice to this briefing on the Lung Association's newest report, Driving to Clean Air. We just released this new report this morning to highlight the health benefits of a future with zero-emission cars and electricity. We are excited to share the results with you. But first, I want to acknowledge the unhealthy air quality that much of the country is experiencing right now due to smoke from the Canadian wildfires. We're asking you to please take steps to keep yourself safe, monitor your local air quality, don't exercise outdoors, and take extra precautions for kids and anyone with a lung disease. The Lung Association has information available at lung.org/wildfires. We also have a free helpline staffed by health professionals that you can call for advice, and you can reach them at 1-800-LUNG-USA. I also want to express my appreciation for you all for your interest in this report and your tireless work to protect public health from dangerous air pollution. Many of you are familiar with our State of the Air report, which we release every April. State of the Air shines a spotlight on the problems of air pollution. And the 2023 report found that more than 1 in 3 Americans live with unhealthy levels of air pollution. And it also found once again that communities of color still bear a disproportionate burden from air pollution exposure. But this report highlights an important part of the solution. The Lung Association places a very high priority on the transition to zero-emission vehicles and electricity. So today's report is the latest Lung Association resource dedicated to showing how that transition can ensure dramatic health benefits for people nationwide. Please don't hesitate to reach out to the Lung Association if you have questions or thoughts after today's presentation and beyond. And finally, I'll close with a couple quick logistical notes. First, we are recording this webinar. And second, please type your questions into the Q&A box throughout today's presentation. We really look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn the program back to my colleague, Laura Kate Bender.
Thanks so much, Deb. I'll just piggyback on Deb's logistical reminders. So yes, please do use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout. We're eager to get to your questions. I'll note that we will stop the recording before we do the Q&A portion of the call at the end so that folks can feel free to ask whatever you'd like. And then finally, I'll just add that this call is not intended for media. So if you are a member of the press, reach out to us at media@lung.org. We would love to talk to you about the report, but this call is intended for our colleagues in the health, environmental, and environmental justice communities, and we're very happy to have you here today. So I will kick us off. So Driving to Clean Air, as Deb mentioned, is the latest in our series of reports looking at the health benefits of a zero-emission future. In this case, we're looking at we're providing an estimate of the potential public health benefits of a widespread and rapid shift to zero-emission passenger vehicles, as well as electricity generation. This report builds off an earlier Lung Association report from last year, zeroing in on healthy air. We've taken that data from that report and we've pulled out the benefits for the cars, the passenger fleet, as well as the electricity sector getting to zero emission. And that's where these numbers that you hear about will come from. But first, as Deb mentioned, I want to share some quick context on air quality in the US from our State of the Air report. Our Driving to Clean Air report, as I mentioned, is the latest in a series of reports that look at the solution with regard to how we get to a zero-emission future. The problem, as Deb mentioned, is that more than 1 in 3 Americans live in places with unhealthy levels of air pollution. That totals about 120 million Americans that are living in these communities that are impacted by unhealthy levels. And so, as a background for our new report, of course, we keep in mind that there are major health risks associated with these places, and that we want to both bring attention to the challenges, but also the opportunities when it comes to solving for harmful air quality. And of course, these levels of air pollution harm children and adults in many ways. Across ozone and particle pollution that we track in our State of the Air report, these pollutants can cause coughing and wheezing, shortness of breath and asthma attacks, worsening of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Particle pollution can cause lung cancer, and a host of other health impacts, from premature deaths to susceptibility to infections to heart and lung problems. There's always emerging research on new and more serious health impacts with regard to the effects of air pollution. State of the Air chronicles some of those recent reports and research. But the fact is that we know that 1 in 3 Americans living with levels of air pollution that can cause these health harms is far too many. We also know, all of us on this call know well, that there are major disparities in the impact of air pollution. Our report from State of the Air 2023 found that people of color are 3.7 times more likely than white people to live in a county that got failing grades for all 3 measures of air pollution in the report. We also saw that nationally, people of color were 64% more likely to live in a county with any failing grades. So we're seeing dramatic disparities in the impact of air pollution on communities of color in our State of the Air report, which of course reflects decades and decades of research that show the same. And we also know, and State of the Air 2023 shows, that all of this is happening in the context of climate change. Climate change is making it more difficult to clean up unhealthy levels of air pollution. Many of us are living that today, in fact, as climate conditions ranging from extreme heat to drought to wildfire smoke, like we're seeing due to the Canadian fires, are making it harder to clean up our air and to keep the gains that we've made. That's part of why it's so important that we take a look at the transportation sector as well as our electricity sector, because it is a source of both air pollution and greenhouse gases that drive climate change. The Lung Association and other health and medical organizations often say that climate change is a health emergency, but it's also a health opportunity. Because if we seize this need to transition to zero emissions, not only can we address the impacts of climate change, we can also address air quality problems that come from other pollutants from these sources. So here's what we looked at in our report. We made a couple of projections. We set targets for the transition to 100% zero emission sales of new passenger cars by 2035. We also looked at, in the modeling, the benefits of a national power grid, an electricity grid, with no combustion by 2035. This is based on President Biden's call to decarbonize the electricity grid. But at the Lung Association, clean doesn't just mean carbon-free. It also means that we're not burning fuel for electricity production. And so in order to realize these benefits, we not only need to see clean electricity, it needs to be clean non-combustion electricity or zero emission. I mentioned those targets 2035 for both the 100% sales of new passenger vehicles and 100% zero emission electricity generation. Those are the numbers that underlie the analysis in this report. This report also provides cumulative totals. So we're looking at the cumulative health benefits from 2020 to 2050 across that 30-year period of the impacts of getting to these goals for zero emission transportation and electricity. Here's a quick overview of the tools and models that we used in this report. So we, as a baseline, we used EPA's modeling to generate what would happen without the policies that we've modeled in the report. We worked with consultants at ICF using their own grid modeling tool that we compared with the business as usual case. And we based that business as usual case on Bloomberg's New Energy Outlook grid projections. We also used a model from Argonne National Labs. We use Argonne National Labs' GREAT model to look at the upstream emissions of this transition. And then finally, we translated all this into health benefits with EPA's COBRA model to generate estimates and monetize benefits of the health impacts of this transition. To dive into what those benefits are, I will now hand it over to Will Barrett, National Senior Director for Clean Air Advocacy at the American Lung Association and lead author on this report. Take it away, Will.
Thank you so much, Laura Kate, and thank you everyone for joining us. I want to start by making sure I can advance slides. Laura Kate, could you go to the next slide, please? Great. So here we're trying to highlight again the health benefits of the passenger vehicle fleet moving to zero emissions. And one of the things we found was that there are major benefits to be had from the passenger fleet in terms of a 90+% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, in smog-forming oxides of nitrogen or NOx, and then significant reductions in fine particle emissions or PM2.5. And one of the things we want to note here is that we're seeing about a 60% reduction in PM2.5, and that accounts for, in our research, the impacts of brake and tire wear. So there's still the brake and tire wear challenge going on even through the shift to zero emission technologies. We do account for the benefits of regenerative braking and making sure that, just wanted to highlight that there are still going to be these challenges associated with fine particles. Next slide, please. And here again, while in this study, we're really focusing on the health side of the equation rather than the climate side of the equation, our original report for the Zeroing In on Healthy Air report highlighted major public health benefits, but also major climate benefits, 1.7 trillion in public health benefits through the broad transition. One of the things we found in that report was that the passenger vehicle fleet is going to generate the lion's share of the on-road greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits. So here you see over 60% of the on-road benefits, about a 2-to-1 benefit over the electrification of the trucking fleet. And again, we know that the passenger fleet is a major source of climate pollution in the on-road sector, in the transportation sector. And so this isn't terribly surprising, but wanted to highlight that here for everyone. Next slide, please. So the big headline in this year's, or this current report, I'm sorry, is that we could see over $975 billion in public health benefits out to 2050 on a cumulative basis across the country through this transition to the clean power grid and the 100% sales of zero emission vehicles by 2035 across the country. This equates to almost 90,000 premature deaths avoided, over 2 million asthma attacks avoided, and over 10 million lost workdays avoided because the air will be that much cleaner by reducing the harms caused by the combustion of fossil fuels, both in the transportation side and in the clean energy side, or the energy production grid. So one of the things we wanted to highlight again is these are cumulative numbers, they're national numbers, and we'll go to the next slide. We also break this out at the state level. So we hope that folks can take a look at this and really try to localize the use of the report. We hope you find information helpful. These are the states, the top 10 states that have the greatest benefits shown in the report. So there's a mix here that I think is interesting to note. There's a couple states that have already adopted the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program to set that 100% zero emission standard by 2035. There are some states on the list that are considering it, or we are hoping will consider it in the near term. And then there are states that haven't, started that process or have, serious concerns with moving to zero emission technologies. But one of the key things here is that, and you can go to the next slide, at every state level, we see major public health benefits. And especially in those states that aren't considering yet or aren't starting their process yet on the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program, what we're seeing is that hundreds of billions of dollars in public health benefits are on the table, tens of thousands of lives saved. So I think the report can, yes, show where we've got the states that have already taken that step of adopting the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program, those that are considering it or have adopted earlier versions of zero emission vehicle standards, and then those that aren't, and really try to emphasize in those states where, politically feasible, especially, that you can move forward with stronger standards, more health protective standards, using your authority under the Clean Air Act to better protect the health of your residents. And I think that's the bottom line of why we're trying to do this analysis. So here, this map is essentially showing, the mix of states that have either, taken the first Advanced Clean Cars program with zero emission vehicle standards out to 2025, or those states, the 7 states that have now adopted the Advanced Clean Cars 2 standard out to 2035. There's certainly other states in the mix that have adopted only, the criteria pollutant standards, and we lay all of that out in the report just as a way of showing kind of where states are at different stages, but that there are major benefits on the table across the board. So next slide, please. So again, with our kind of ongoing efforts to do public education work and our advocacy work, and this report is hoping to bring some of that together, we're really trying to emphasize with this report that these major public health benefits are what's, one of the key outcomes of US EPA's policy decisions in designing their new vehicle emission standards for passenger vehicles. We want to make sure that those EPA standards are as stringent as possible, that they go to the strongest possible alternative and even build upon that, and make sure that these policies are adopted this year so that these benefits can start to accrue, and the policy, the back end policy process can be completed as quickly as possible. The next thing we want to really emphasize again is the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program. This is where states can take advantage of the authority given to them under the Clean Air Act to opt into stronger vehicle emission standards that were, in this case, first set by California in 2022. We have that initial slug of 6 states who have already taken Advanced Clean Cars 2 program, live and are moving that forward. We know that there's several states along the East Coast right now with active public process going on. We're expecting more states to move forward this year, and we're trying to use this report as another data point for states to consider when they're moving into this space. We know that telling the story of the public health benefits, the reduced suffering, is really an important part of that conversation as the states are considering their future with clean vehicle standards. So really want to emphasize that and take a real opportunity to highlight the need for states to act and join the Advanced Clean Cars 2 growing list of states. The last thing we wanted to highlight is also, removing barriers to access to zero emission vehicles, removing barriers not only for for charging, but also to make sure all communities can participate in the health benefits or accrue, gather the health benefits of this transition to zero emission technologies. So I want to make sure at the local, state, and federal levels, we're building on the investments that have been made possible through the Inflation Reduction Act or the IIJA, and make sure that we're really living up to those commitments under Justice 40 and local and state policies that are designed to really emphasize equity in the development and design of these programs. We just want to make sure that no community is left behind, and we want all of these communities to be able to take full advantage of the health benefits of zero emission technologies, and that'll come in a lot of different forms potentially, but at the policy level, at the investment level, at the incentive level, the Lung Association is really trying to emphasize the need for increased targeting of the benefits in communities that need them the most. They're suffering the most today due to unhealthy air and transportation pollution. So next slide, please. So here, just to highlight some of the key things that we've got going. Laura Kate, did you want to take this one?
You start and I'll add.
Okay, perfect. Tag team. So we've put out a national press release on the report. We've issued some press releases in several states, 10 states, where we're most active as the Lung Association in ongoing development of the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program. So really trying to target some of our media outreach in those states where the process is underway, or we're trying to push it to get underway with all of our partners in the various coalitions who are working so hard on the ground. We're trying to add more resources there in those 10 states. We have a social media package that's going up. We'll be able to share that, and I hope that folks on this call can really amplify that as we go forward. And then again, really highlighting at the state and federal level the need for stronger advocacy approaches or policy development by our state and local leaders state and federal leaders, to design the strongest possible emission standards or adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program. Laura Kate, anything you wanted to add?
Sure. So number one, veterans of these release day rollout calls may remember that in the past we have done Twitter storms. This time around, we opted not to. We welcome folks amplifying the results of this report. We really appreciate it. Folks who are on one of many Clean Air listservs this morning got a set of sample tweets, and I'll make sure that everyone on this call gets them after. But essentially use the hashtag #DrivingToCleanAir to help us spread the word about the benefits in this report. We really appreciate it. Doesn't have to be today. This week is great. But of course, we want this to be useful in an ongoing way as well. And to build on Will's point with state and federal advocacy, what we hope this report provides is data that you can drop into any of your state and local, as well as federal advocacy points on this transition, both to zero emission passenger vehicles and zero emission electricity. So we hope this report will be an ongoing resource for you as you're engaging at various levels, whether it's state Advanced Clean Cars 2 rulemaking opportunities, federal opportunities with EPA and others, or other policies that are getting us closer to zero emission transportation to help make the health case for that transition. On the topic of federal advocacy, we have an action opportunity associated with this report. So if you go to the report website, get to it through lung.org/EV, you can take action. We are urging people to sign our petition to the Biden administration on both EPA's proposal for stronger, cleaner car standards and stronger, cleaner truck standards. We've combined both the light, medium, and heavy duty rulemakings into one action associated with this report because there's so much happening on vehicles right now in the federal space. This QR code will take you to the link of that action alert, or of course, it's also available at lung.org/EV and going to the new Driving to Clean Air report and then clicking on Take Action. And finally, before I open it up for questions, I'll just note that we've been really gratified to see great press coverage so far. Here are a few examples of hits from Forbes, CNN, Health Day, and Grist. We're excited about the coverage. We've also seen good local coverage in the places that Will mentioned where we've done targeted state releases. If folks have questions about media coverage so far, we are happy to answer them. But now I want to move us into the most important portion of this call, the Q&A for you all. So as a reminder, number one, I will momentarily stop the recording so that folks can feel free to ask their questions.